Hello everybody and welcome to another Destiny build video. Today we have a really strong Titan build for the Prismatic subclass. I'm talking allowing you to do content that is 40 to 50 power disadvantage. And I'm not even kidding. This one is incredibly strong. It's going to allow you to refund your health like in an insane amount. You're also going to be able to upkeep Frost Armor, Amplified, Radiant, and even Overshield almost all the time. It is amazing. You'll also be able to suspend enemies, freeze enemies. It is incredibly strong. Probably one of the best Prismatic Titan builds I've personally ever made and or seen. So without further ado, let me show you how to make this insane Titan build. Starting off with our exotic of choice, we're going to be using an Insurmountable Skullfort. This is going to make so that final blows with arc melee abilities will trigger health regeneration and fully restore a melee charge. Melee hits will also grant arc melee energy. To pair with our exotic helmet is going to be our stats here, and I would recommend running stats that are going to be around a 100 class. Try to get melee up to about a 200, like as close as 200 as you can get. This is because having a melee stat that is above 101 up to 200 is going to increase the amount of damage your arc melee ability is even going to do, and obviously the more damage makes it even better, so that way it guarantees a kill, which will refund your health and even refund the ability. After that, I'd recommend having a fairly high grenade stat and even a weapon stat. Super and health are not going to be the most important stats. Obviously, we're getting health from other means, and our super is kind of the least of our main aspects of this build. For weapons, you can actually have on whatever you would like, but I would highly recommend having a stasis weapon on in your kinetic slot. This is because of an artifact mod that's going to be showed later on when we check those out, but this is going to allow us to get frost armor. So I would really recommend having something like Seraphine Haze. This is one of my new favorite SMGs, which is a stasis weapon because it's got some really good perks. But obviously, any weapon that deals precision damage that is stasis is going to be a good option. That same principle goes here in your energy slot for solar weapons. So if you can run a really good combo of a stasis weapon that can hit precision hits and a solar one in your energy slot, then that would be the best combo you can go with. Now, as you can see, I don't have an exotic on, and that is because, yet again, there is nothing that is set that you absolutely need in this build. Yet again, you don't even really have to use a stasis or solar weapon, you just won't get the full effects from the artifact. So, it is entirely up to you what you want to use. Now, one recommendation I'll give, just a nice little tip, is going to be the Navigator, because the Navigator will give you woven mail when you hit enemies. So if you want to add a little more damage resistance, the Navigator is a nice little touch. But yet again, you do not need the Navigator on, nor do you need any of the weapons that I have on. You can go ahead and put on whatever you'd like. Maybe there's a weapon that is better suited for an activity. You can just throw that one on. And yeah, so like I said, go ahead and put on whatever weapons you would like. The only recommendation is a stasis one that can deal precision damage in your kinetic slot, and the same principle for one that is solar in your energy slot. Up next, we have our subclass here, which is going to be Prismatic. So we're going to start here with our super. Now, I have Twilight Arsenal on, but you can actually use Twilight Arsenal, Hammer of Soul, or Blade Fury. You can technically also use Thunder Crash or Glacial Quake. It actually is not like a set one you have to use. The only reason why I recommend using one of these bottom three ones here is going to be because of a fragment we'll get to in just a little bit. And when we get to that fragment, I will tell you why and go into a bit of a detail of why I recommend only these three. So then up next is going to be our class ability. You can actually use whichever one you would like: Rally Barricade, Towering Barricade, or Thruster. Just because of cooldown's sake, I recommend Rally or Thrusters, but if you really want to use Towering Barricade, that's going to be just fine. For your jump, go ahead and use whichever jump you would like, whatever one you're most comfortable with. For your melee, you're going to want Thunderclap on, because obviously our helmet only works with arc melee abilities, so Thunderclap is going to be our only option. For our grenade, you're going to want Shackle Grenade on. Shackle Grenade is going to obviously apply a Strand, aka Darkness, elemental debuff in suspension. And this is going to play in part 2 when we get to another fragment later on, which I'll go into a little detail when we get to that one. Up next, for our aspects, we're going to use Knockout. Knockout is going to make so that when you critically wound a target or break their shield, it will increase your melee attacks, range, and damage. This is also going to allow you that when you defeat targets with melee attacks, it will make you amplified and restore a portion of your health. Defeating more powerful combatants will increase the amount of health that you get back. Now this is going to be a great way of getting our amplified. So this is how we're going to get a nice little 15% damage resistance with amplified, and we're going to obviously make enemies less accurate to us too, since that is a beautiful thing with amplification. And for our second aspect, we're going to use Diamond Lance. Diamond Lance is going to spawn Diamond Lance every time we shatter and or defeat a target with an ability or stasis weapon. So we can use these Diamond Lances to slam into the ground with our right bumper, or your melee button I should say, and that is going to allow you to give yourself 2 stacks of frost armor, or you can throw it and that's going to allow you to freeze enemies in an area. Technically, slamming the ground should also freeze enemies. Now we're going to move over here to our fragments, and we're going to start with Facet of Protection, pretty much the most essential one available on every single prismatic build. This is going to make you take less damage when you're surrounded by combatants. Up next, we're going to use Facet of Purpose. Facet of Purpose is the reason why we were talking about supers earlier. Picking up an Orb of Power will grant either Bolt Charge, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of our super. Now, this is why I recommend not using Thunder Crash or Glacial Quake. That is because obviously with Glacial Quake on for stasis, we are going to get Frost Armor. But we already will get Frost Armor from Diamond Lance. So there's no real point in using Glacial Quake because we're going to not get another elemental buff that we could. We're going to lose out on getting another one from Facet of Purpose since we are already getting it from Diamond Lance. And for Thunder Crash, the reasoning is that instead of getting amplified, which would be better, but we don't even need it thanks to Knockout, we get Bolt Charges when we pick up an orb. And Bolt Charge is nice and all, but it's kind of useless if you don't have a way of getting it back really fast. That way you can actually use the Bolt Charge. So instead of all of that, I would recommend using Blade Fury, Twilight Arsenal, or Hammer of Soul. That way when you pick up an orb, you will either get a nice chunk of Overshield with Twilight Arsenal on. Mind you, when you have Overshield, you also get a 70% damage resistance buff. Or if you have Blade Fury on, you'll get Woven Mail, which is really nice. I believe it is around a 40 to 45% damage resistance buff there as well. So that's a really good option. Obviously, if you're using this one, then there's no reason to use the Navigator like I suggested before. And if you're using Hammer of Soul, you'll get Restoration. Obviously, that means you're going to be able to have a ton of health just get regenerated with incoming damage not able to stop it. So that is why I recommend these three, is because we don't need Frost Armor since we have Diamond Lance, and we don't really need Bolt Charge because we're not going to get a ton. So that would we get like a ton of Bolt Charge, which is going to allow us to obviously just continuously use it. So that is up to you which super you will want, now knowing why we want one of these three. I would personally recommend Twilight Arsenal, as I think the Overshield is just the best option. Obviously, while you have an Overshield, enemies that hit you hit the Overshield, not your health, meaning that your health will just regenerate on its own. So it's kind of like having Restoration built into it. And you also get a 70% damage resistance buff while that Overshield is active, which is like 30% more than Blade Fury's Woven Mail. So that is kind of why I like Twilight Arsenal, or Void I should say, on your super with Facet of Purpose, is because Overshield is basically just giving you all the benefits of Restoration and Woven Mail while also having a second health bar. Up next for our Facet, we're going to use Facet of Courage. This is going to make our Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. That is why we're going to be using the Shackle Grenade, because it will allow us to suspend enemies, which is a darkness debuff. Same with Diamond Lance, which is going to allow us to freeze enemies, which is also a darkness debuff. And that is going to make our super, but most importantly, our Arc melee deal more damage. The fun part with Facet of Courage is that it is a 50% damage bonus increase with Arc melee, or I should just say melees in general. So any light melee attack, so Hammer Strike, Shield Throw, or Thunderclap, is going to deal 50% more damage to targets that are affected with a darkness debuff. So that is why we're going to want to suspend bigger enemies or freeze bigger enemies with Diamond Lance or a Shackle Grenade before using Thunderclap on, say, a champion or a bigger enemy like a boss. This is going to allow us to really destroy them with Thunderclap. And combining Thunderclap with Facet of Dawn as our next fragment is going to allow us that when we hit an enemy with our Thunderclap, it will give us Radiant. Radiant's obviously going to increase the damage of all of our weapons. allowing our SMG or whatever you may happen to use deal more damage, take out enemies even faster. And last but not least, we're going to pair it with Facet of Solitude. Facet of Solitude is going to be a great choice since we'll get into it a little later, but an artifact mod is going to have us get precision hits. So this is a really good choice because while we're dealing those precision hits, we might as well emit a Severing Blast, which is going to make all outcoming damage from the enemies that we sever significantly reduced, meaning we basically get a weird form of damage resistance in a way. It is very, very helpful to have on. Next, we have our armor mods. So we're going to start here with our helmet. We're going to put on a siphon matching the main weapon you're using. If you did put on a kinetic stasis weapon, then this is going to be the one you want, a stasis siphon. Then your next two, you can just put on whatever you'd like. If you'd like a hands-on and an Ashes to Acid, you can throw that on. Dynamo, Powerful Friends, Radiant Light, whatever you like, you can put in these next two slots. For your gauntlets, you're going to want a heavy-handed so that when we get a kill with our Thunderclap, it will generate an Orb of Power. And we're going to put Impact Induction and Focusing Strike on so that when we cause damage with our Thunderclap, it will give us back some grenade and class ability energy. On our chest piece, you're going to just want to put on the 3 resistance mods that matches the activity that you're doing. For example, the activity I was in had massively increased stasis damage, so I put on 3 stasis resistances. You can put it on for arc if maybe you have something that adds arc damage incoming, or whatever it may be. For the boots, you're going to want to put on an elemental charge and 2 surges matching the main weapon you're using. This is going to allow us to get around a 17% bonus damage while we have armor charge to our main weapons, which if you have, obviously, yet again, the kinetic slot filled with a stasis weapon, then you're going to want stasis weapon surge, and elemental charge is going to help us keep that armor charge up like crazy, since we will be generating, obviously, a ton of elemental pickups, thanks to our artifact and whatnot. And for our class item here, we're going to use a Reaper and 2 Outreaches. This will make us so that when we use our class ability, it will refund some melee energy. So should we mess up, not get a kill with Thunderclap, this is going to help us get that back. And then we're going to pair it obviously with Reaper, so that way our next weapon kill after using our class ability is guaranteed to spawn an orb. So that is our armor mod selections. Now, of course, we have an artifact here that's going to enhance this build. So let me show you every mod you're going to want to have on here, column by column. So starting off here in the first column, outside of obviously the weapon champion mods that nobody cares about, since it'll be different based on what you're using, we're going to start with one with Frost. This is going to make it so that while we have Frost armor, our stasis weapons will gain increased reload speed and stability. So that's going to help us out, obviously, if we're using our stasis weapons when we have Frost armor. And you can also put on Tightly Woven so that while you have Woven Mail, gain increased class ability and grenade stats. This is for if you're using Blade Fury, or the Navigator, this is a good mod to have on. And if you happen to not be using a stasis weapon, then you're going to want to swap one with Frost to Threadling Proliferation. And that is obviously assuming that you're using a strand weapon, which would be the Navigator and or just any other strand weapon in the game. And if you are, then you're going to want to swap Fever and Chill over here to Pack Tactics. But regardless, we're going to move over here to our next column. So if you are using a stasis weapon, then you're going to want Fever and Chill. This is going to make so that rapid precision hits with your stasis weapons will give you Frost armor. This is how we're going to keep up Frost armor. We're also obviously going to have Frost armor from Diamond Lance. Just another reason why Glacial Quake with Facet of Purpose is not a good option. Then we're going to have on Elemental Benevolence, since we will be able to give elemental buffs when we get a kill with our Thunderclap or even a hit. That will give our nearby allies Radiant as well as some other ways to do that. So Elemental Benevolence is nice because we'll get back some class ability energy. Frost Renewal is going to be nice because while you have Frost armor, taking critical damage will release a burst that freezes nearby combatants and grants Frost armor to you and nearby allies. Just another way that we're going to be able to give elemental buffs to our allies. And then obviously Refresh Thread, so that was picking up an elemental pickup matching our subclass element, which will be Void, will give us some energy to our least charged ability. Now we're going to pair that here with, in our next column, Elemental Coalescence. So defeating targets will have the chance to create an elemental pickup matching our equipped super, which is Void Breaches. And obviously picking them up is now going to give us class ability energy, which is just intrinsic on Void Breaches. But now it's also going to give us back some more energy to our least charged ability thanks to Refresh Threads. And for our final column, we're going to put on Radiant Shrapnel. dealing sustained weapon damage with Radiant, or defeating a scorched combatant with a weapon will cause the target to release solar projectiles that deal damage and scorch on impact. Now this is for, obviously, we can get Radiant from Fever and Chill should we have a solar weapon on in our energy slot, or if we hit an enemy with our Thunderclap, that's going to give us Radiant, and then that's going to let us continue our Radiant Shrapnel loop. And last but not least, we're going to use Frigid Glare. While Frost Armor is active, Stasis Precision Final Blows will cause combatants to release a freezing burst. This is going to be an amazing one to have on, so this is a good one if you have a Stasis weapon on. Now, if you're not using Stasis weapons, then you're probably going to want to swap this to either Tangled Web or Shield Crush. So that's going to be a good option, like I said, if you're not using Stasis weaponry. But if you are, Frigid Glare is a good choice. And if maybe you aren't using a solar energy weapon to get you Radiant, or maybe you just aren't really upkeeping Radiant too much, maybe you want to swap it off, then you can swap off Radiant Shrapnel for Shield Crush or Elemental Overdrive, or technically even Tangled Web. So it's kind of up to you. So that is up to you which one you want in these last column here, because there is a little bit of flexibility depending on which one you want to go with, or depending on what weapons you're using. And with all of that, that is how you put this build together. So this build is going to make you very, very powerful. Like I said, it's going to take you through obviously minus 40 to minus 50 power level content, which also means mythic. It's going to just absolutely shred. It has ways of healing you. It has so much damage resistance that it can give you in Amplified, in even technically Woven Mail if you have that options on. But even especially Overshield and Frost Armor, it is incredibly strong. And you will pretty much get back your Transcendence almost like all the time. There's almost infinite upkeep on it because of how much arc damage, which is light, you'll be dealing. And obviously, as long as you have on your Stasis weaponry and or a strand weapon, then you're going to have mainly darkness weapons with mainly light abilities. So it is very, very good at getting Transcendence back. Like I said, it deals a ton of damage, clears out everything. It is a wishful build for anybody looking to do these high-end content. This is an amazing build for Titans to go with. And of course, it will get you through to get your sweet, sweet loot. So with all of that being said though, that's the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this build. And while you're down there, if you like the video, why not hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share, all that good jazz. Because it tells me you like these videos. And why not stick around, join the family, and check out some other build videos. With all of that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, I will see you around the tower.